As the country prepares for the 2024 general elections, the Independent Electoral Commission has partnered with Google, Meta, TikTok and Media Monitoring Africa to curb disinformation ahead of the 2024 general elections. For more on this development, we're now joined by Mama Bolo. He is the IEC's Chief Electoral Officer. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. In trying to understand the collaboration, which we will get into more detail a little bit later on, help us understand how the proliferation of social media has changed the electoral landscape in South Africa.
Well, at the dawn of democracy, the nature of communications was different than to what it is today. And certainly the political parties' methods of campaigning were then largely driven by the need to have large rallies and so on. With the change in the new technologies that have been brought, digital technologies, including social media, there's need for less contact, physical contact that is, but more engagement on digital platforms and so on. So we do expect that the 2024 national and provincial elections are going to be fought largely on the digital platforms. Of course, with a bit of interaction as different parties would structure their campaigns differently. But there's no gainsaying that at the heart of the campaign is going to be a creative utilization of social media platforms.
You also know that in the past few years there's been a surge in disinformation, particularly on social media platform, and if left unchecked, it can undermine the conduct of credible elections. What are some of the typical examples of this disinformation? And when you say if left unchecked, it can undermine the conduct of credible elections, what does that mean?
Well, let's explain it in this way. Social media has a lot of benefits. Firstly, it's cheap. The communication is instantaneous. And it has potential for great reach. Other forms of campaign and communications don't have those benefits. But concomitantly, social media has potential harms where there would be deliberate, intentional harm intended with the posts that are made, especially against people perceived to be opponents. For instance, one party could say in a stronghold of another party that the stations are not going to be operating in that area, so that that party does not enjoy benefit of its support at the voting station. Or people have been killed in a particular area and the IEC has closed voting stations. So the partnership that we announced with the social media platforms, it's intended on the one hand to facilitate the free flow of information in an open and democratic society such as ours. Yet at the same time have a mechanism to deal with instances of disinformation. Because as we say in the statement, if we don't address that, there's a likelihood that disinformation may imperil the credibility of the electoral process.
You have signed a framework with these various companies, and one of the points under the purpose of the agreement is to allow online platforms to implement policies and processes such as content removal, advisory warnings and delisting to address disinformation. With less than 6 months to go, I guess maybe taking a look at the implementation of these policies, how soon do you want to see that, or how soon can we see that?
Well, the Real 411 platform, which is basically a complaints portal, it's active. Any person who observes an instance of disinformation related to the election, they can go lodge a complaint there. It will be evaluated to ensure that it is indeed disinformation. and it will then be referred to the platform, who can then take those remedial action. A delisting, a warning with a watermark that says this is disinformation, or even a delisting. So those are some of the remedial actions that the platforms already have in terms of their own internal procedures. But facilities are already available and they are there for use by members of the public.
I guess maybe let's address the members of the public aspect. Your word to South Africans who are on these social media platforms, who engage in this kind of behavior or activity. Also the challenge of bots, because we understand that some of this misinformation may not be because of a human behind a gadget.
Yes, certainly. Part of the partnership is digital education. We think that it is our responsibility that we share with the social media platforms to educate members of the public, our voters, about the dangers of disinformation, how to identify disinformation, and how to engage with it. Because we think that a significant proportion of disinformation incidents may be negated by a well-informed populace.
If you would allow us, please, or indulge us with less than 6 months to go, I beg your pardon, before the election. I do beg your pardon. You've got some court challenges, in particular in relation to the Electoral Amendment Act and Political Party Funding Act. How will this, if at all, impact the work of the IEC ahead of next year's elections?
Well, at the moment, the Constitutional Court is yet to issue directions in terms of which it will process the matter. We are eagerly awaiting that. And we hope that if the court is minded to hear those applications, that they'll be heard expeditiously and direction be given on those aspects. The attitude of the Commission is that the litigants have a right to litigate and to clarify these important constitutional issues, and we take no offense to that, for as long as these matters are expeditiously disposed of, such that they don't impair negatively on the preparations that are in fact already underway. We have already announced importantly that on the 18th and 19th of November there's going to be a general registration weekend, and we can't go back on that. We've got to offer citizens an opportunity to enlist to be on the voters' roll.
So with that, you are comfortable with the preparations you have in place ahead of next year?
Comfortable, cautiously so. We do need to clear these litigation matters because once they are cleared, the playing field will be leveled and there will be certainty, which is required for all contestants as well as for the Commission, but ultimately for the voter, because an election is not so much about the contestants. Ultimately, an election belongs to the citizens of the country because it is an opportunity for them to determine the political leadership that is going to drive public policy for the next 5 years. I
guess maybe I'm asking because this is being touted as the biggest moment, some even going as far as comparing it to 1994.
Yes, it is. We hear that, and we are alive to the challenges that that sentiment will bring about. And we are preparing, having taken into account those possibilities. In other words, we pull in no stops to ensure that our staff is well trained, our logistics are well defined and fit for purpose, and that our processes, our ICT infrastructure can withhold the rigors of such an election.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. Sim Mamabolo is the IEC's Chief Electoral Officer.